And welcome to Paranormal Versus. I'm your host, Michael, joined by Kell and Matt. So,
Hello.
how is everyone today?
Absolutely hunky dory.
Yeah, good.
I think that's the first time, Kell, you've ever said that on this show.
There's a lot of words I'm not saying on the show, Michael.
That's an American saying, honky dory.
Hunky. Is it? I thought it was British.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, we were British, but I hear it
Yeah,
more
you
over here.
just stole it off us, didn't you?
No, it's funny as I was reading something on, it was about Paul Revere and how everyone in America says during the ride, Paul Revere was yelling, "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Well, that makes zero sense because America was British. So it's like he's yelling, "We're all coming." So they said the actual sentence was, "The redcoats are coming."
Yeah, I've heard that.
And it's funny how we distort history. But so, what is new in your world, Kel, since we were last on?
Oh, wow. Yeah, not much.
That was a big lead in.
Yeah, basically I've had a few weird things that's happened this week, which I'll be speaking to the guest about today, later on. Apart from that, I bought a load of vintage jewelry. I mean, a load of vintage jewelry. So I've been going through that and like tidying it up and see what ones I can salvage and repurpose and stuff like that. But yeah, there's been a little few bits and pieces that's happened since I've got that. So I'm just wondering if there's anything attached to any of the jewelry, but only time will tell.
I would say so.
Hmm.
Probably a 99.9999% chance of that.
Yeah. Like I say, I mean, some of it's like I found some really, really expensive jewelry as well, so I've scored. If I'm going to sell it, it's like worth quite a bit of money compared to what I paid for it. So um I think I'm gonna get into now vintage jewelry on top of everything else that I do.
There you go. Apparently, you got a
So
knack for it.
yeah, but that means there's no room in my house for anybody else to move in.
Well, it's a good thing you already got all your rooms spoken for.
Yeah, that means Matt, you can stay where you are. No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Unpack your boxes, Matt.
Here you go, Kel. Crossroads meets the Ocean Rose says, "Cleanse the jewelry in holy water."
I would, but the jewelry's that old, and some of the stones in it are what you call paste stones, and you can't get them wet at all. So I'll probably have to like stick them in some salt or something.
Oh, I thought you were
But
going to say you'd have to wear gloves to handle the holy water.
yeah, that as well.
How about you, Matt? What's new in the world of Matt?
Well, I've just been packing up this week, really getting the whole house packed up and boxed up. And as any of our regular viewers can see, that I haven't got my normal background behind me of being sat in the studio because it's all in bits now. It's all been packed up. So, yeah, I've just been busy doing that, really. So it's been quite a hectic week getting all of that done and trying to make this place sort of habitable at the same time while there's boxes and everything else everywhere. So, yeah, that's been my week.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, Matt and I are not at 100%. So if we sound different, it's because we are a little under the weather. So
Yeah.
bear with us.
Man flu.
Yeah.
Allergies for me.
Bless your
Bit like
cotton
girl
socks.
flu, but not as bad.
But I think everyone is excited to meet our guest. So I think now's a good time to bring her up. If you're a fan of my show on Tuesday nights, the energy that surrounds us, you will recognize this guest. And for those of you who are fans of this show, you are in for a real treat because she is an amazing guest. And I'm going to bring her up now. Everyone, welcome Vicki Joy.
Hello. Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for
Good to have
coming
you
up.
on.
Yeah.
So for everyone in the community seeing you for the first time, could you give a little background of your story, Vicki?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been kind of doing the podcast circuit here for about a year and a half. And man, just thanks to everyone who's been so supportive. I could not have picked a more relevant, timely topic had I had a crystal ball as sleep paralysis. And so I wrote a book called They Only Come Out at Night, Exposing the Dark Weapon of Sleep Paralysis. And man, it's just been going gangbusters. I cannot believe how many people have gotten in touch with me and corroborated so much of what I had already experienced and knew, as well as added new pieces to the puzzle. As with any book, as soon as it gets published, you can already write a second one, right? So it's been crazy. The reason I wanted to write the book was because as a lifelong experiencer of sleep paralysis and astral abductions, I couldn't believe just the bevy of misinformation online pertaining to the topic. A lot of the stuff that's online is just blatant gaslighting. You know, if you have this, you're schizophrenic, or you've opened some sort of portal because you're a wicked person, or the church rendition of that is, okay, you're a sinner, you did something to invite this. So it's all kind of blaming the victim mentality kind of stuff. And it's a lot of, this is 100% physiological if you're on this side of the argument. And then if you're on the more spiritual side of the argument, every single thing has to do with the demons. And I just think that there is some truth that lies somewhere in the middle. And up to this point, it has been very clinical, uninvolved spokespeople that get to drive this narrative rather than the people that have actually experienced it. And I think given where we're at now with all of these podcasts and everybody able to freely speak, it's about time that the people that actually experienced this stuff get to lead the narrative on what it really is.
And with that, I think Kell has a burning question for you.
Yeah, I've had this happen a few times. I don't know if it's got anything to do with sleep paralysis or if it's something else. Every now and again, because I can't sleep without background noise on, so I sleep with my TV on. Mm-hmm. And then there's been a few times I've woke up and I've been convinced that the characters on the program I was watching were watching us. But I couldn't move at the same time to try and grab the remote control to turn the TV off. That's one of the things. Now, last night, I woke up, I felt very paranoid that somebody was in the room with us. I could barely move. And then when I could move, I was trying to turn the TV because the TV had turned itself off for some reason. I was trying to turn it back on and I couldn't remember how to turn my own TV on. And I've got a book next to my bed as well that I write in every night. And sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and there's writing in it that I can't remember doing. Or like last night, I was trying to write a sentence and all it came out was the figure 8, the number 8. And I couldn't write. I couldn't remember how to write, nothing else. And I just couldn't function whatsoever. And then I can clearly remember it. I just couldn't do anything, couldn't move, couldn't remember how to switch the TV on. I was just wondering, has that got anything to do with the sort of stuff that you know about?
Yeah, it absolutely can. I think it's a really good place to preface that the phrase sleep paralysis was really never a good phrase. And especially now that more is coming out, more detail about how vast these experiences can be, it really, to just say sleep paralysis is no longer a real good phrase. And it never has been. And so I'll just preface what I'm about to say with, there are physiological aspects of sleep paralysis, and there's nothing paranormal about it at all. Every single person during certain sleep phases are in a state of paralysis. It's just physiological. We are put into various phases of paralysis at night in deep sleep so that we don't act out our dreams. It's a protective measure for the body. So we're not sleepwalking, we're not wetting the bed, we're not kicking people and falling downstairs and injuring ourselves, sleepwalking into traffic, that sort of a thing. And so when you have things like sleep paralysis or bedwetting or sleepwalking or PTSD, these are areas of our sleep that are interrupted, and that paralysis state is affected positively or negatively, right? So There's nothing paranormal in and of itself, and myself and many other people. There are times where we wake up and we're in that altered state of consciousness as we're drifting off to sleep or as we're coming out of sleep, where we can't move, and it's a very dreamlike state. We don't quite know if we're asleep yet or awake yet, and it's actually an extremely peaceful feeling. It doesn't always have some demonic sort of entity showing up in the room or whatever. So the one thing that we have to get straight off the bat is when we're talking about what we're going to be talking about on the show today, what we're technically talking about is a sleep paralysis attack or a sleep paralysis episode. So sleep paralysis becomes the adjective, right? It is something that is occurring to us while we're in this normal physiological state of paralysis. And so what makes it confusing is when we are in those altered states of consciousness, we can't really tell if we're awake or asleep. Now, I'm going to give you a really practical example of something that we've probably all had happen. When you're completely sleep deprived, you're tired, you haven't gotten to sleep, and it's taken you hours to fall asleep, and maybe you're really stressed out about something in the morning, like you're afraid you're going to miss a flight, or you've got a work meeting that you're really stressed out about. We all have these experiences where we dream that the alarm goes off and we get up and we get ready for work. And then it becomes this revolving dream within a dream, where then we kind of wake up and we realize it was just a dream, and we drift off to sleep, and then the alarm goes off and we get dressed again. And then we wake up and realize that was a dream. So when we're in that state where we can't really tell if we're awake or not, or asleep or not, these episodes, these sleep paralysis episodes, and the forces at work during the dark episodes. So depending upon your worldview or your perspective or your experience, because there's different experiences, these things have a way of very cleverly adapting to one's culture, one's folklore, one's religion, one's worldview. So they know how to mask themselves to approach you in the way they need to approach you. It's very specific sometimes. So what these forces, beings, entities, demons, whatever your religion or worldview, whatever you choose to call them. And I'll say from personal experience, having this happen to me for over 40 years, it's not always the same force at play. And at some points, it could be human, because there are areas of arcane knowledge and secret societies and the occult and the military where human beings know how to remote view. They know how to astral project into your dreamscape or into your room. And so it can even be human in some cases. So where I'm going with this is that they, and again, I'm allowing every listener to fill in the blank as to who they think that they is, whoever are these dark forces behind this agenda are, they take advantage of our physiology. It's just like a human bully. Bullies pick on people they know that they can pick on. They're not going to go to the biggest, tallest kid in the class. They're going to go to the most vulnerable. So likewise, these astral bullies, they're going to come to us when we are most vulnerable, when we are confused. We don't know if we're awake or asleep. We don't know if it's a dream. We don't know if we're in our bedroom or if this is some sort of an overlay on our pineal gland that is mimicking our bedroom. But if you look really, really closely, if you're observant and lucid in these situations, a lot of times you're going to see a glitch in your bedroom that is the giveaway that you really aren't awake. And we can talk about that more if that's of interest. And so what's interesting to me about your experience, Kell, is it sounds a lot to me like a sleep paralysis experience. You're in this altered state of consciousness where you're in between wakefulness and sleep, and you are discombobulated as to whether or not you're asleep or awake. And you believe that you're awake because you're seeing your room, you're seeing the television, but there's things that don't match up. Now, in your case, you had sort of lost the ability to write or to figure out how to turn the TV back on. But in other cases, what happens to me a lot is I'll wake up in these states and I will reach for something and my hand will like go through it, or I can't grab onto it. Or I had a very recent experience, very similar to that, Kell, where I had a remote in my hand, or maybe it was my cell phone. And I just kept pressing it. And then when I would get close to the button I needed, it was almost like there was some plasma in between and my finger couldn't quite hit it. And when I woke up, because I thought I was awake, I realized, no, I really was either asleep or in an altered state with some sort of overlay, because I was wearing the same clothing. I was in the same chair where I had fallen asleep, but the chair was facing a different direction all the way on the other side of the room for where it is in reality. But it wasn't until I woke up and recalled what had happened that I realized, oh, I really was not awake, because the chair hadn't moved that distance. And so I think this is what I get a lot of pushback on. And I even get pushback on it from people who've experienced sleep paralysis their whole life, because when you go through something your whole life that is very confusing and you don't 100% know what's going on, and you have spent years reading experts online telling you this is where you are and what's happening and who it is, you have a way of grasping that official narrative without really evaluating as to what your real experience was. And there was a couple things unique to me where I can at least tell you, in my experience, the official narrative cannot be possible. They tell you that you are awake in your bedroom and you cannot move anything but your eyes, and your eyes are open, and that you're observing these things in your bedroom, these shadow people or whatever your experience is. There's a couple of unique things with me. I was born with a birth defect. I had all sorts of surgeries from the day I was born all the way up until I was 15. And one of the aspects of my birth defect is I didn't have a tear duct in my right eye, which means I would wake up with so much kind of eye goo all over my eyes in the morning that my eyes were crusted shut. And I had to wait until my mom came into my room with a hot washcloth to melt that stuff away so that I could open my eyes without tearing eyelashes out and things like that. So for all of the years as a child that I had these sleep paralysis experiences where I was laying in my bed awake with my eyes open, where I could see my room and the carpet, I could see my teddy bears. I absolutely believed that I was awake in my bedroom. It wasn't until years and years later that I realized that my eyes could not have been open. They were glued shut. And in adulthood, there have been many, many times where I have had a sleep paralysis experience with a sleep mask on, because of the birth defect, my eyes don't close all the way. When I close my eyes, the lids don't quite touch. And so if there's even a speck of light on, it's like the lights are on. And so a lot of times to sleep, I have a sleep mask on. Sometimes I even have like something like a piece of clothing or something wrapped around it to just seal it shut so there's no light getting in. And when I have sleep paralysis in that scenario, I'm wide awake, but I'm not seeing my bedroom. And I'm seeing all sorts of strange things that would never be in my room. And so one of the things that I encourage people who have sleep paralysis often to try to do if they can, it's very hard to observe in situations like this because you are in a fight or flight situation. Typically, most time people are very afraid. And when you are in a fight or flight situation, you're not really objectively pulling back and taking notes and surveying the situation. But I think they kind of gave something away in the very first Matrix movie when they were in the jump space in the hotel, and the Neo character saw the black cat kept coming around. It was this glitch in the Matrix. And my experience has been there's always a glitch in my bedroom. So there's either pictures on the wall that aren't really there. The bedroom door is on the wrong wall. There's a window that's not really there. There's a bedspread that's the wrong color. It'll be very close. It'll be about 98% accurate to your room. And one of the phrases that is brought up all the time in UFO abduction scenarios, but is very rarely attributed to sleep paralysis, and I think we need to borrow the phrase because it's going on in our situation too, is UFO abductees, UFO experiencers, they will talk about screen memories, and they will talk about the dichotomy between what they saw and experienced and what they remember seeing and experiencing. And so a lot of people who have experienced that, they will go under hypnosis And in the recollection of what they really were seeing, they'll talk about the alien grays and things like that. But before they've gone under hypnosis, they'll talk about seeing a 4-foot owl or a deer or a wolf or a moose or something like that. And it's these screen memories. I have a friend who experienced this her whole life. And she said at one point, she woke up in the middle of one of these experiments with the alien grays around her. And she said, "What am I doing here? Where am I?" And they began to freak out like she's awake. And instead of her waking up in her bedroom, instantly the scenery just changed and she was in her grandmother's house. But she was still confused because she's like, "Well, what am I doing at my grandma's house? I don't live with my grandma." And so then, bam, it changed a third time and she was in her bedroom. And so if they have some sort of technological or spiritual ability to influence our mind or to put overlays onto our pineal gland, they can get us to believe very easily when we're in an altered state of consciousness, to believe in a reality, especially if we're not looking for it. Once you start looking for it, it's easier to see through the facade. But a lot of times they have these screen memories. I'll tell one more story and then I'll give the floor back to you guys. One more story is, I heard a man tell a story recently on an episode of The Confessionals with Tony Merkel, how she had had one of these screen memories where she saw the 4-foot owl. But when she went under regression, it was an alien gray. And she said that as she was coming out of her paralysis and out of her hypnosis, she heard a, telepathic voice in her head saying, "Owl, owl, 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 owl." And so it was almost like this telepathic sort of mind control where they were having her remember you saw an owl. And it's a way of masking who they are, correct? And it's really interesting because if you go into brain science, and this is why I really think it's important to get the medical, the scientific, the technological, and the spiritual all together to get a full piece of what's happening in sleep paralysis. I don't think it'll make a lot of sense if you compartmentalize it all as something medical, all as something technological, or all as something demonic. And I had the opportunity yesterday to talk to a woman who was a nurse, and we were talking about this from a medical perspective and from brain science perspective. And what really fascinates me about the woman with the story about the owl is when I was a kid in the hospital, I developed this little trick. Whenever I had to drink something in the hospital that was gross, like some liquid medicine or something, if I could drink it fast enough, the way I would trick myself to drinking this gross stuff is I would say, as I was drinking it in my mind, I would say water, 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 water. And I'd be so focused on water that for the most part, I could get most of it down and it would just taste like water to me because I had tricked the brain. You can trick the brain very quickly. And so there's definitely something more than just black magic or demonic involved with these things. I think there's tech out there, but I also think that they have an extremely in-depth knowledge of human brain chemistry and psychology. And it's kind of like us. We can trick a kid. We can trick a kid into, stealing candy from a baby. You know what I mean? It's much easier for us to fool a child than to go and fool someone who graduated from MIT, right? And it's the same thing. It's not necessarily that we're stupid and we're gullible, but they have so much more knowledge of our own brain chemistry and physiology that there's basic things that they're doing that really are just amount to smoke and mirrors. But because we aren't given that knowledge, it looks like magic. And I think that these things are basically not as powerful as they appear to be, but they have the ability to torment and terrorize us because they are utilizing aspects of our physiology that we have not been educated in. So it looks really magical, and it really isn't. They just know something we don't know.
That's interesting.
So I'm curious on those grounds. Do you think that's why they wait until you're in that sleep state, because they say that's when we're our weakest? and that's why they target that point?
So I think that's half of it. I think part of it is vulnerability. It's easier to get us when we're defenseless and confused. But I also think that their visibility and their interaction with us is dependent upon our being in an altered state of consciousness, specifically where the pineal gland might be activated or certain activity is going on in the brain. Neural pathways are firing, et cetera, et cetera. And where this is going to start to change in the future, and I think we're already seeing it, is in the past, in order to get a human being into that altered state of consciousness, they would have to be asleep, or they would have to be on some sort of mind altering chemical. And so, in the old days, when you had the writers who would, take absinthe, and they would take various drugs to get into a state of inspiration, right? And you've got the ayahuascas and the psychedelics and the mushrooms and things that people take in order to communicate with the spirit realm, can communicate with the ancestors, right? But what we're getting into now with the technology that we've got, with the frequencies, the 5G, the Wi-Fi, and with so many people either on psychedelics or on psychotropic medication, you've got all of this stuff working together. And what we're seeing now a lot amongst the younger generations, especially, I kind of call the sleep paralysis that I'm writing about, like the classic sleep paralysis, or the baby boomer sleep paralysis, right? So the baby boomers and some of Gen X have this classic, I wake up, I can't move, I see a shadow person, I see red glowing eyes. What we're seeing now amongst the millennials and the Gen Zers, and by we, I mean people who are personally contacting me and telling me their stories, is these sleep paralysis like episodes are happening when they are wide awake, just sitting in their bedroom doing homework. And it's a combination of so many things now, whether it be television, earbuds, VR goggles, you've got binaural beats. And when you are super connected to these frequencies and the invisible electromagnetism in the air, and you've got all this technology buzzing around you, you are in a different brain state. You're not in that diligent, sober-minded beta wave brain state when you're awake anymore. Just watching television with flicker rates and with the binaural beats and some of these meditation apps and the frequencies that people are listening to as they're going about their business. These are all interacting in such a way that it's triggering not only alpha states, but it's powerful enough where it's actually bringing people into theta states, which is a state that is really only supposed to be active when you're asleep. It's a sleep state. And so even though people's eyes are open, all of this technology is working in a way where your brain is relaxed into a theta state. And this can happen through meditation. It can happen through binaural beats. It can happen through psychotropic medication you're on, or smoking marijuana, or a combination of all of these things. And so, yeah, that stuff all works because we do that kind of stuff for relaxation, right? But it also thins the veil. And so what we are going to see more of in the coming days, especially with AI and quantum computers and all these other things that are coming down the pike, we are going to have more people giving sleep paralysis stories that, again, just like I said at the head of the show, the phrase sleep paralysis will no longer be applicable because people are going to start seeing this wide awake. And where that's dangerous for the people who are being harassed by this stuff is, look how easy it's going to be to tell that person, you're crazy, you're schizophrenic, you're mentally ill, and they're going to be medicated and they're going to be put in even deeper states of sedation, which will put them in even more vulnerable state of harassment and attack. So I do think that the type of sleep paralysis that most people my age or older have experienced is going to soon be a thing of the past. And a lot of this stuff is going to be in the waking state going forward.
So the what I told you about what happened to me, is that a kind of sleep paralysis?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. My guess would be, Kel, if I had to guess, my guess is as you woke up and were trying to turn the television back on or trying to write in your journal, my guess is that you weren't really awake.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I did actually write in my journal. There's the number 8 in my journal, which I don't know why there's the 8. That's not what I was trying to write. That makes sense.
That's interesting. It could be an infinity symbol though, because that's a lot of people in sleep paralysis, they will talk about symbology. Some people don't see entities. They see numbers, they see symbols, they see geometric shapes, and they don't typically know what they mean. There is strange stuff like that. This happened to me only about a week ago. I was on the road. I was in a hotel, and I just have this little pedometer, I think you call it, where you stick it on your belt and it counts your steps during the day. Yeah. And us writers don't get around much, so we gotta force ourselves to get some movement in. And so at the end of the night, I take it off and I reset the button to 0, and then I stick it on my nightstand. And so I clicked it to 0, and I stuck it on my nightstand. And when I woke up in the morning, it had steps on it. And I thought that nothing like that had ever happened to me before. And I had no memory of having a disturbed sleep that night or having any sort of nightmares. Yeah. And that's a whole nother layer of complication to this. Is there have been times where I've been traveling on the road with family, and I woke up the next day, I feel well rested. I don't have any sort of memory of a bad dream or anything. And my family member who's sharing the hotel room with me will say, I had to pray over you last night, Vic. You were thrashing around and you were moaning and groaning and you were trying to get the name of Jesus out. And I have no memory of it. And so what we also have to realize is a lot of people who have frequent sleep paralysis, there's probably a lot of times where you're having it and you're not going to have any sort of memory of it whatsoever. The telltale signs aren't going to be there. But sometimes we see these glitches, like we do see the thing written in the journal, or we see other people will talk about being attacked in their sleep. And when they wake up, they have bruises and scratches that match the exact location. And so where is that line where some people actually come back with physical evidence, even if they were in some other realm or some other state of mind, that there was also some... in some ways they were still tethered to the physical as well.
Yeah. A few years ago, when my daughter used to live here, I used to have dreams that somebody was about to take us, and it was a very, very, let's say, vivid dream. And there was this once that when they grabbed us on the arm because they were going to take us, I woke up and I had a bruise forming on my arm, like it was going purple. And so I showed it to my daughter and my son-in-law, and they were like, well, we never heard you get up or walk around or nothing. But the bruise was in a way that I couldn't have done it myself, where the fingerprints were. I would have had to like discombobulate my arm to get it in that position to bruise my own arm. But we don't even know what happened there. But it was just a dream that they had grabbed my arm. And when I woke up, I was like, look, I've even got the bruises.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yep. This is common. People talk about this, and this is where in religious circles, that's why we refer to it as spiritual warfare. And this is what is so sort of unfair, really, if you want to use the word, because of the way we are raised to think about stuff. When we wake up, anything that happened to us, we're just told it's a dream. Oh, thank God that was just a dream. And a lot of us, when we have experiences like that, we'll say like, oh, thank God I woke up before anything happened. Yeah. And what I'm starting to come to grips with, and it came to my attention years ago and it was too much. I was like, I can't even fathom this right now. I can't think about this right now. And so it took me some years to finally take a deep breath and say, I've got to take a look at this, whether it's scary or not. And that is, there really are a lot of similarities between sleep paralysis and the UAP or the UFO abduction experience or stories. And I do think that in many cases, this sleep paralysis can also be an abduction, but it's an abduction into the astral rather than into a craft or a laboratory. And so what becomes exponentially more potentially terrifying once you come to grips with the fact that those experiences might have a lot in common is that when UAP experiencers come back from their experience, they will often not remember anything that happened. They'll just remember before it happened that there was some sort of a craft or a being or a bright light. And then they have this missing time. So they know something happened because of the missing time. With sleep paralysis, you're never going to pick up on the missing time because we all go to sleep for 5 to 8 hours. And when we wake up, we're not alarmed by missing time. So the one kind of clue we would have that maybe we were occupied for several hours is hidden from us. But the other, possibility that we have to consider if there are similarities between these two types of abductions is that if the people who have experienced the UFO abductions do not remember what happened to them, then it is possible that there are aspects of the sleep paralysis scenario we're not remembering. And because we wake up with recall, we think we've remembered it, because I remember seeing a shadow person. I remember seeing glowing red eyes in my room. I remember them saying, we're going to drag you to hell. I remember not being able to breathe. So because we can recall so much of it, we assume we're recalling all of it. And in a lot of cases, we're not. Now, with UFO experiencers, they will say, typically, these are the two ways that people with regressed memories will come to grips with the fact that this is how they remember things. They can either go under some sort of regression therapy, hypnotherapy, that sort of a thing, or they start having dreams and they start to piece together that these dreams aren't dreams, but they're actually memories. They're latent memories that are coming up. And this isn't even just with UFO abductees. There are survivors of sexual abuse where this will happen. There are survivors of ritual abuse where the memories will come back and they will start to then remember things. It's like memory triggers. And then the more they examine it, the more they realize that actually isn't a dream. That was actually a memory coming back that really happened. And here's the double-edged sword of that. When you go through that, it can be very scary and very off-putting. And a lot of us were not ready to come to grips with the fact that something that was already very mysterious and terrifying might actually be even more involved. But that is how the healing from a lot of this comes, because what a lot of people don't talk about, especially now where it's really popular and it's sort of in vogue, like let's go and Bigfoot hunt and let's go to Area 51 and take pictures and let's go to graveyards and haunted houses and, let's explore all this. And what a lot of people, they're either not connecting the dots or they're weighing in the balances, the consequences and feel like, okay, it's worth it, so I'm going to do it anyway. But many times you can't cross over a portal into another dimensional space without coming back with some sort of attachment. And these things are smart enough to know. It's not like the horror movies where, they go to a haunted house and then a ghost is in their house the next day. Like they're smarter than that. They will lay latent for sometimes years, and then they will manifest in a completely different way. They're not necessarily going to manifest as paranormal activity in your house. It might manifest in illness. It might manifest in the deterioration of relationships and things like that. You're never going to put two and two together that this nefarious activity in your life now, this decline in your mental, physical, spiritual, or relational life was tied to the fact that you were back here 5 years ago flirting with this stuff and opening doors and inviting things to speak to you and conjuring things. When it's like vampire lore, when you provide a vampire with an invitation over the threshold of your home, you have entered into a covenant with that thing, and it now has legal access to you and your home and everyone in your home because you've given it that permission. You've invited it in. And in vampire lore, the only way you get out of one of those threshold covenants is you die. Death always breaks a covenant, till death do us part, right? Death breaks covenants legally. And the only other way to break a covenant made with a vampire is that the ownership of the home changes hands. The deed of that home, if it's given to another person, if you sell the house or if you move, they have to regain entrance now into the home because there's a new landlord there, so to speak. So anytime you are going through a portal, crossing over into a liminal space, or you're doing anything to conjure or invite or give permission to speak with something in another realm other than the terrestrial realm, whether it be the astral or some spiritual realm, some other dimension, you have given it legal access to you. And this doesn't mean that they're going to haunt your house or they're going to try to kill you. It's going to be in more subtle ways. And the reason why it's important to try to remember the things that perhaps we don't remember in these experiences is because if there was any sort of covenant or contract made with those entities, you will be bound to that covenant until you can annul that covenant. And I talk a lot about that in my book.
That's starting to actually make sense now, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's so hard because we are so intrigued as human beings. We are so intrigued with the spirit realm and with demonology and with the paranormal. I mean, how can we not be? And so it is just that fine line of, the curiosity killed the cat. Like, is there ways that we can research this? And are there correct motives for researching this, such as protection and healing and helping people who are being tormented? Are there correct reasons and motives for delving into this stuff without crossing the line and actually endangering ourselves or others when we open doors that we can't shut?
So do you think like for like the people that's having experiences like this, and just from my experience, I've been getting really weird illnesses that they don't really know what's causing them and stuff like that. Is there a way to try and find out what it is, or is there no way?
Yep. Definitely, Kell, it's possible. And this is kind of where it gets tricky, being in a position that I'm in where I've written a book on it. And so people come to me, and what's really hard is when your whole entire, head is buried in the sand, researching this stuff all the time, it's hard to see the forest for the trees anymore. And so what I try to tell people is, what is that? Is that Occam's razor, where sometimes the most obvious answer is the answer. And so I'll give you one example before I answer that question. I had a friend once, a coworker, and she came to me and she's like, Vic, you have to come to my house and pray over it. There's demons or ghosts or something in my house. And so she explained the scenario. And I said, honestly, I don't, want to steal your thunder, but it sounds like you have mice in the walls. And she was so upset with me for not, placating to this grandiose ghost story, and I said, well, I'll come and I'll pray for you. Like, I'm better safe than sorry, but I'm just telling you, And so anyway, quite a long period of time went by, and she did kind of sheepishly come back to me a couple months later. And she's like, I didn't really want to tell you this, and I don't want you to say I told you so, but we found tons of mouse crap all over the bedroom and in the dresser drawers. And we brought in the exterminators, whatever, and they found evidence of tons of mice in the walls, right? So sometimes, we don't want to overlook the fact that there could be some genetic or physical ailment wrong with us. We don't ever want to overlook that. We don't want to delve into the realms, of, Christian science, where I'm never going to go to a doctor because everything's spiritual, right? Everything can be cured by faith. Yeah, we got to be careful with that stuff. But with that said, I have this appendix in my book, and it's a prayer mapping exercise, and it's how to just nail down the source. Why have I been harassed my whole life with sleep paralysis? Why me? I never opened this door. I never looked for it. I've never done psychedelics. I've never played with a Ouija board. Why are these things after me? And so when you're in that scenario, there's ways that you can pray down to the actual source of that open door, so that rather than just trying every other thing for the rest of your life, you can get right down to the source of it. And I've had a lot of people call me, and we've gone through this exercise together. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Mike. We've gotten down to it. And I love it when I've worked with people and they'll call me back and give me an update, and they'll tell me, like, I found the source and it was this and it was that. And recently I had about half a dozen people get back to me and said, I did the prayer mapping exercise and it worked. I'm 6 months free of this stuff. And I've had in about a year and a half, I've had about half a dozen people, which statistically isn't a lot of people. It's only 6, right? But it's honed back into Reiki or myofascial type of things, where they've gone into some sort of a clinic for their back pain or for pain, and it's been some sort of like new age chiropractic sort of a thing. But they've said, I never would have put 2 and 2 together because I only went once, and it was like 8 years ago. And so it's not always this tit for tat little immediate thing. And the fact of the matter is, and this is another reason why this gets so confusing, there's people out there who've had Reiki and it's sleep paralysis. They've never had sleep paralysis. And there's people that have played with the Ouija board and they've never had any paranormal activity. And other people will be like, man, I got rid of all my Iron Maiden albums and it never happened again. Well, there's plenty of people that listen to Iron Maiden that don't have sleep paralysis. And so it's a very tricky thing to try to pin down. It's a moving target. And what opens the door for one person is not necessarily going to open it for everyone. But with the prayer mapping, it's a way of just taking an inventory of every single thing that you think might be something that could have been an invitation or opened a door to invite. Is there anything that I've done that might be interpreted as a invitation to interact with me or speak with me or reveal yourself to me? And then you can kind of hone in on maybe what one of those things is and do the work to annul that. And what gets complicated with it is sometimes people do this and it's a one and done. They do it and they're like, I figured it out and it never came back. It was one and done. And other people, because there's more than one open door, it'll go away for a while, but then it'll come back. And I get those calls too. And those people are very discouraged. It didn't work. And in some cases, it's not that it didn't work. It's that you might have more than one open door. And in another case, it could be that it worked and they are now reappearing in hopes to, renew the lease, so to speak. Let's see if we can't get them to open the door again, and let's get permission again. And I've had that happen to me. I've done a lot of like cleansing and annulling of covenants. And I got a really, really, really big one identified last year. And I talked about this on a couple shows, but about 2 or 3 days after I finally got that door closed, I had an extremely intense astral dream where when I woke up, long story short, they were trying to get me to recovenant and just get myself right back into it. And so we're dealing in many cases with tricksters, and it's especially interesting when you talk to people like on the ayahuasca trips, for example. They're getting a little bit of a different experience. A lot of people in the ayahuasca realm, they will get into the fractal realm, and this is super fascinating. So instead of angels of light or demons or red glowing eyes or aliens or shadow people or hat people or incubus, succubus type of things, they will see clown and jester like characters. And instead of being terrifying, they're more mocking. And so that's a whole different sort of a realm. And it fascinates me. Paul Stobbs, he's from the UK. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Paul. Paul does a lot of research on the fractal realm and the clowns and the jesters. I think his YouTube channel is called Understanding Conspiracy. He's a great guest to have on. But the clown and the jester characters, you don't hear about them as much in sleep paralysis, but they are there. And here's the difference between them and the more ominous, like shadow people and the demons and stuff. So I have a lot of people that contact me and say, I saw this, shadow man in my room. I saw this, black mist in my room. I felt an extremely ominous presence in my room. And I started quoting the Lord's Prayer, and it went away instantly. Well, when I deal with people who have seen the fractal and it's the clowns and the jesters, I've had people write to me and say, I started reciting the Lord's Prayer and they mockingly started repeating it after me. So the one gal I just talked to said, I was like, the Lord is, or no, that's this 23rd Psalm. Like, started reciting the Lord's Prayer, and this this clown-like, half clown demon-like character was just mocking her. Our Father, who art in heaven, just like a child, like when you repeat, your brother or sister just to annoy them, right? But it was more of a menacing than just to do it for annoying. And so there's a whole hierarchy of these different entities, and I think depending on which entity you see, which one presents itself to you, it's probably an indication of what agenda you're on, or what track you're on, or what door you opened. There's different aspects to these things, and usually people who have had sleep paralysis their whole life, they see the same shadow man their whole life, or they always see this woman, or they always see the little giggling girl, or whatever. And not too often, unless you get into the really extreme cases of survivors of ritual abuse and things like that, not too often are you going to have people who have seen a whole cast of these characters. There's usually one sort of assigned to you. And similar to the UFO experiences, these experiences in sleep paralysis, they can also be hereditary. They can be genetic. A lot of times parents will see it manifesting in their children, and then they'll talk to grandma, and grandma had it too. And a lot of these things happen in family lines, which again is, I think, why it happens for some people at such a young age. Like, I didn't do anything to open a door. The door was already open. It was open. And to that point, during the prayer mapping, when you come down to the source of the open door, you might not have been the one that opened it. It's not always you. And that's kind of the criticism I have with a lot of the online information about sleep paralysis, or a lot of the information you're going to get if you go and talk to a pastor or a priest. The only explanation you typically get from them is, what did you do to open this door? What did you do wrong? And it's a form of, re-victimizing the victim. And it could be something that happened 100 years before you were born on that piece of property you're living on, or something that an ancestor did, a vow or a ritual an ancestor did, or it could have to do with secret society involvement, or something to that effect. So just understand, when everyone's pointing their finger at you saying it's your fault, it absolutely may not be.
That's interesting.
If you're knocking on the door and you open the door and there's nobody there, you've just given something permission to enter. You've done, like you're saying, the legal, you now have entry permission. Is that the same with the sleep paralysis?
Yeah. So I have read that a lot of people have this phenomenon where they hear, but it's very specific. It's 3 knocks at the door, right? And they'll go and there's nobody there. And this is what I'm going to tell you. Do I believe that there are cosmic forces and entities out there that can knock on your door, and when you open it, they can woo themselves over the threshold? Yes, but I'm gonna give you a caveat as to, I don't think that every time this happens, just because you've opened the door, that they're inside, and I'll tell you why. The answer is in Revelation 3:20. There's a verse in the book of Revelation where Jesus says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door and lets me in, I will come in and eat with him and he with me." So Jesus, I'm not trying to be controversial here, but Jesus is from a spiritual realm, right? Now, he did come and interact on earth at some point in the terrestrial realm, in a terrestrial body for some time. But what I'm telling you is, this code isn't just for vampires or shadow people or bad people. Anyone in the spirit realm, angelic, good, bad, anyone who's not of terrestrial DNA, they cannot enter into our home without our express permission. So here we even have Jesus Christ saying, okay, you just heard me knock at the door. Okay, you just heard someone knock at the door, right? You heard it. You answered it. But if you didn't follow through with a, "Please come in, you are welcome in my home," or, "Hey, who's there? Who's there?" come on, if you're not expressly inviting them in, they do not have permission to come in. And so at that point, you can do one of two things. You can just close the door and realize, just don't invite them, don't communicate with them, just close the door and move on. And if you are of more of a spiritual persuasion, if you want to feel more confident, then you can just say, you can shut the door and you can say, I do not give you permission to come into my home. I do not consent. Go away. And if that makes you feel better that no invitation was given. So I do think that kind of thing happens. And I've had that experience a lot. I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and not only do I hear the 3 knocks on my door, I hear in my father's voice, Vic, knock, 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 Vic. I mean, it's, and even sometimes when we're in the same house, like we're in the same room, there's times where he's in this office with me and he's down at the other end, and I'll hear him say, Vic, and I'll say, what? And he hasn't called me. And so I have even gotten good now about training myself that when my dad says, Vic, I'll just walk over to his desk and I'll say, did you just call me? And he'll say no. Because even just saying that, what, and I'm just hyper vigilant, you guys. You might not have to be this hyper vigilant, but when you're already harassed all the time, you become hyper vigilant. And so that's something that's been happening a lot lately for me. So to answer your question, Michael, I absolutely believe that this is a thing. I think it is one way that they trick us into giving them permissions or invitation. But I don't think that just by opening the door, they get in. You have to actually invite them. And there's so much packed into that Revelation 3:20 verse that I just said too, that's not even written in the text. If you don't understand the culture and the context and the history and the language and the geography of that text, you're missing so much. What is actually being explained there is a threshold covenant. And I do go at great length in chapter 4 in my book to explain these threshold covenants. It's the vampiric code, that when you step over a threshold, whether it's a physical door, whether it's a stargate, a portal, a liminal space, it doesn't have to actually be a door, right? Once you step over, or you invite something on the other side to step over, once that invitation is given, there is deep historical significance to threshold covenants. They were hospitality customs that were in play all over the world up into the mid 1800s. It really has only been in the last, less than 200 years that we've lost sight of the fact that they used to do this. Anytime you invited someone over to your house, you would enter into a blood covenant with them. You would offer blood at the door. And as we became more civilized, these customs got less grisly. And that is when the blood started getting substituted for salt. A salt covenant is another way of having a blood covenant, because both salt and blood are components of life. And so as things got less grisly, there would be salt covenants. And so when it says in Revelation 3:20 that once an invitation is given, Jesus steps over that threshold, there's an assumption that a blood covenant has been enacted and that blood has been put onto that threshold. And then it says that when he gets inside, he will eat with you and you with him. And you're like, what significance does it have that once he gets inside the house, we're going to have dinner? It's because that's the breaking of bread. And when you share bread with another person after a threshold covenant, you are entering into a second salt covenant with them. You're breaking bread together. And in sharing that salt, you are covenanting to, basically the owner of that home is covenanting to treat that guest as a blood-born son or daughter. As long as you are in my home, I will protect you with my own life. I will feed you, I'll clothe you, I'll take care of you. We're in covenant together. And this gives, I'll just give you a fun little example. This gives credence to what's going on in the New Testament at the Last Supper when Jesus is having the communion service with his disciples. He dips the bread in the sauce. And then later he says, whoever I broke this bread with and is the one who's going to betray me. That is a salt covenant. so this was during Passover. They were eating unleavened bread, so it didn't taste very good. It was somewhat tasteless. So they would dip it in a fish sauce because that would make the bread salty and therefore taste better. And so when Judas received that piece of bread from Jesus and ate it with him, they entered into a binding blood covenant. It was a salt covenant. And Jesus was basically saying, I'm going to go. In fact, it says it right in the text. I'm going to prepare a place for you. That is what you say during a salt covenant. My house is your house. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to protect you. And you are likewise saying, I'm going to protect you with my own life. Well, now we know that Judas broke that salt covenant because he, in fact, betrayed Jesus. He was not going to keep that covenant. And this is lost to modern readers. We don't understand the culture and the history and the context and the language and the geography of the text anymore. So we have a bunch of 21st century, seminary interpretations of the scripture, which completely strip the supernatural out of the Bible. The Bible is extremely supernatural if you know what to look for. But this is even shown in the Da Vinci painting. You've got the Last Supper, and you've got Judas with his arm on the table, gripping the bag of silver, which was the blood money for betraying Jesus. And right at his forearm is a little jar of salt that's tipped over on the table, and there's salt spilled on the table because that blood money was evidence that he broke that salt covenant when he took that piece of bread and ate it with Jesus. And so we don't understand this stuff anymore. All of what I just explained to you is that in the spiritual realm, all of these covenants that have been around since the dawn of time and that occurred in the spiritual realm and existed in the spiritual realm as legal codex and still exist as legal codex, that just because we've forgotten about it or we don't know about it or we think it's stupid and we don't believe it, it is enforced in the spirit realm and they understand it. And that is why these sleep paralysis entities are very often coming to your door, your bedroom door. And they're often the UFO experiencers, they're often coming to a window. A lot of times when we first encounter these entities, we're in liminal spaces. And it's because they are attempting to get us to step over a threshold of some kind because they know we're too ignorant to understand that we've just entered into a legal covenant with them. Now, you hear all this garbage about the celebrities they're sold to the devil and you can't get it back. So here's where they're right and here's where they're wrong. There are ways of entering into covenants and contracts with these entities. Where the lie is, where the disinformation is you absolutely can annul these covenants, but you have to know the right way to do them. And going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, if you look at these encounters as something purely clinical, medical, physiological, if you look at it as purely scientific, purely technological, or purely demonic, you're not going to be able to annul the covenants because there's aspects of all four of those things at play. So if you're not of a religious type and you're like, okay, I'm going to get help for this sleep apnea and this stress in my life, and I'm going to get rid of the tech in my bedroom when I sleep, you might have some improvement in your sleep state. But if you don't understand the spiritual aspect of it, you are not going to be able to annul the covenants because the covenants are spiritual covenants. And don't hear me saying you have to be Catholic or you have to be Christian or you have to go to church. I'm not talking about religion here. I'm talking about the spiritual realm of existence, a dimension where other things are going on. There's another reality going on that when the spiritual realm morphs over into the terrestrial realm of which we're a part of, and things get complicated and we start covenanting with things from another realm or dimension, that's spiritual. And so if you ignore or poo-poo the aspects of this whole phenomenon that are spiritual, you might get some temporary or some relief from some symptoms or experiences, but you're not going to annul the covenants.
Wow.
Oh, excuse me. So I'm curious, just real quick, we're sitting there saying, if you have friends coming over and you're obviously saying, yes, my friends, you can come in. If they have an attachment on them and you say, hey, friend, you can come in, but you have to, you can leave all your baggage out there. Does that separate them, or does the attachment still get to come across the threshold and have permission to enter?
Yeah. So with that, and that's a really complex question, and it is a great question. So we don't really live in a world where we can't put a keep out sign on our house and tell all of our really good friends, you're not allowed in my house because I'm afraid you might possess me with your evil, like we can't do it, right? And we live in a culture where we still have, we invite people over for dinner and we break bread with people who we probably don't really want to covenant with, right? And so what I think it has to do with is to protect yourself in a situation like that. First of all, if you have a real concern, like if it's obvious to you, if you get a bad vibe off of someone, then let's meet at a restaurant, right? Let's go to a neutral space, because we do have the right to keep our spaces clean, right? So, but with that said, there's a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing where we don't necessarily know what their motives are, or if there's something going on, or there's a lot of people that might have these attachments and they don't even know it. So my take on that is, if my space is clean, it's prayed over, it's kept pure, I know that I'm following all of the rules by way of not inviting things over. You can kind of get into like Psalm 91 warfare there. And for those maybe not familiar, Psalm 91 has kind of been dubbed the soldier's prayer, because there's a verse in there that says 1,000 may fall at my side, 10,000 at my right hand, it will not come near me. And so a lot of people are comforted as like soldiers, like I'm going to survive through war, right? But there's a lot more going on in that chapter. That chapter basically is a list of all of the spiritual attacks and entities that could possibly come after a person to attack them. And basically it's saying you will not be vulnerable to any of these things and if you read the ifs in there, it's if you make Jehovah your dwelling place. We got a threshold covenant there, because if you make him your dwelling place, it means you heard him knock at the door, you opened it up, he crossed over the threshold, he broke bread with you, right? So if Jehovah has come into your home over your threshold and you've entered into a legal contract with him, he's now the new owner of the home, right? He's got the deed. So all permissions are broken. And this is where modern Christianity does a massive disservice in trying to explain things like pray and ask Jesus into your heart. He'll be your best friend. That's not what's going on there. Receiving Jesus into your heart is threshold covenant language. Hey, if you have invited any of these demonic entities or attachments into your home, the only way you're going to get out of it, according to vampire lore, is to break off and annul all covenants you made with them. You can only do that through death or changing of ownership. So when the ownership of your home changes, you're safe. And that's the whole point of Psalm 91 right there. Psalm 91 is a recipe for how to annul spiritual and astral contracts. And so when you're in that kind of a state, it's not that you don't still have to be discerning, and it's not still that you might want to pray before a person comes and after a person leaves. I'll tell you a little story. I don't think I've ever told this story online, and I'm going to just give you the super brief nutshell. But I came to the office one day, and unexpectedly, and my dad was keeled over in his chair, turning blue. He was almost unconscious, and I was freaked out because I had no idea what was wrong. I could not even get him to make eye contact with me. I couldn't get him to answer a question. He kind of came to and he was completely discombobulated. And I sat down at his desk and I did not know what to do. I had no idea what was going on. And, my dad's 78 years old. And I thought, well, what do I do? And I just began praying. And I was praying just very specific prayers for what do I do? What's my next move? What do I do? And I looked and I happened to see sitting on my dad's desk a very large feather leaning just up against his monitor that hadn't been there the day before. And I was like, Dad, where did this feather come from? And he's like, outside. And we live in the woods, so it's not uncommon that my dad would pick up a pine cone or a flower or something cool. So I thought, okay, that's not it. And then all of a sudden he came to and he was perfectly coherent. And he said, when I got to the office today, it was propped up against the door, almost as if someone was giving it to me. So I brought it inside. And then he conked over again. I'm like, what? So I took the feather. I went up to my dad. I put hands on my dad and I prayed a very, very specific prayer to break all curses, oaths, hexes, vows, witchcraft, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Very long story short, he was up and about and fine within about 5 minutes. And we got rid of the feather. And circumstantial evidence, you guys, I know that if I went to court and pled that in a legal court, they'd say, well, that's circumstantial. And I understand that it is. There's no way that I can prove it. So the reason I tell you that story, and I'm not even telling you the half of it, it got crazy after that. But what I'm telling you in that is, even when you have a home where you've done everything that you can to protect it and to keep it safe and to keep anything that could be a portal or an opening or an open door out of it, you still have to be very careful what you do let over the threshold and who you trust and who's coming in. And, understanding of witchcraft, understanding a little bit about charged objects and rituals, it's going to benefit you. And especially if you travel in the paranormal world, and especially if you're exposing things, because they operate undercover, they operate in secret. And the reason why they have as much power as they do is because we're pretty ignorant about everything going on. So the more that veil of ignorance comes down and the more we figure out and the more we're understanding and the more we're sharing with other people and the more we're exposing, the more potential you have of someone being sent to shut you down. So I know I went kind of far off of your original question there, Kell, as I always do, but
okay. Really interesting. I mean, I've got like a million questions virtually. I really want to ask you, but I don't really want to do it while we're live. That makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. It's funny when you get into these topics and you really start delving into it, it's unfortunate because there's no way of really having an intellectually honest discussion about the paranormal without crossing the line and sounding like an absolute crazy person, right? And I think most of us that are in this realm know that. And so I just appreciate the fact that you guys are willing to mine the depths a little bit deeper. You're not just looking for a couple ghost stories here, and to really get into the language here of opening doors and the covenants and things, because it really is key to why so many people are getting harassed and why people can't get the harassment to stop. And it's too deep of a dive for most people. It starts to get too crazy. It starts to get too personal. It starts to get too offensive because, now you're brushing up against, my worldview and my belief systems. And so it almost has to become an uncomfortable discussion before you can really get to the bottom of it. And I think the reason a lot of people haven't gotten to the bottom of it is because we have been taught in this day and age that here's all the topics you're not allowed to talk about because it can offend people. And I think that sometimes people might have to become a little bit uncomfortable if they really want the real answers to some of this stuff.
Yeah. Like I say, I mean, it's a really interesting subject, and I mean, I've never really connected the dots with like some of the things that's happened, especially recently. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Things I never even thought of, to be fair.
Well, before I dove into the book, believe me, I didn't either. And yeah, you just it's nice and safe when you just think you've got really, really bad nightmares. You know, you don't like them, but once you start asking the question like, okay, what is this and why is it happening to me? You have to be prepared for some of the answers because I mean, and we have to speculate on a lot of this stuff too, because, you know, every 6 months, our knowledge and information on the spirit realm exponentially increases. And the more we get information, the more things do make sense. And the more quickly our assumptions about what's going on become outmoded. And so that's kind of the frustration of things like this. We can sit and have a conversation about this. And a month from now, all four of us might be like, oh, scrap that whole show because now we have this piece and now it all makes sense. So we're kind of scrambling for answers at this point.
Yeah. Wow. Matt, have you got any questions?
No, it's just nice listening to Vicki speak.
Hmm.
Interesting.
You can read this question from the chat room.
Have the Akashic records been used for searching for the open door? I don't know personally because I don't know what everybody is doing, but I actually think the Akashic record is far more beneficial for the ones harassing us because that's why they have so much information on us. So this is where a lot of people in the more religious realm are probably gonna, you know, slap me on the hand because, you know, but let's be, again, intellectually honest. If the Akashic record is some sort of book, I personally think it's a database because I think that the astral realm is far more technological than our current society. So I doubt it's a big book, right? So this Akashic records, if this is a database that houses all of the names and the family lines and the information and all of our thoughts and our desires and our dreams and our accomplishments, it's basically an omniscient database of all things. It is somewhat hypocritical for someone from a more biblical or religious background to say that's nonsense because there are many references in scripture to supernatural books that are like logs, that are records. There are things about the scrolls that get opened and unrolled in Revelation. There's the book of life where all the names are written in and blotted out, et cetera, et cetera. So I really don't think that the fact that there's another kingdom who's mimicked that and they also have records, I really don't find that hard to believe at all. So the thing that gets a little sneaky about the Akashic records is where it's housed and who it is owned by are not necessarily people who are on our side. Now they'll give us information as it benefits them, but let's take for example, I'm talking about like familiar spirits. So there are people out there who are getting just drugged further and further and further down the breadcrumb trail into the woods with some of this supernatural stuff because their spirit guide is their dearly departed, wonderful great-grandmother or their son who passed away or whatever. And what I'm telling you is we know that they have the technology to mimic faces, bodies, and voices. And this is why we know the spirit realm can do all that. We can do it. There's already deep fake technology, and there are apps that you can get where if you've got a certain number of minutes of someone's voice, you can click a button and you can send, messages to your friends in Brad Pitt's voice and stuff. So if we as an earthly society can already deep fake, and we've got holographic technology and blue beam, and we've got these deep fake voice recorders, etc. Obviously, these cosmic beings who are 100 times more intelligent and powerful than us have tech that would blow our stuff away, right? So when you've got grandma coming to you, or you've got your dead son coming to you, and they're giving you all of this inside arcane information about the afterlife and what's real and what the meaning of life is and all that, you've got to do the same thing that you do in the waking world. So if I get a voicemail today from, a famous celebrity on the phone, and it sounds exactly like them. If I get a phone call and this guy says, "Hey, this is Tom Cruise. I'm going to come and give you $1 million." I wouldn't believe it, because I'd be like, how would he have my number? How would he care? Why would he give me that kind of money? And I know that there's apps where you can do that. So it's probably a friend of mine. And so I think that the same sort of discernment and lack of gullibility we have in our waking world, we question everything we see. Now, when we see things on the news, we're like, well, I wonder if that's fake. I wonder if that's a green screen. I wonder if this is mind control. And yet when we deal with the spirit realm, all of a sudden we trust these things. It looks like my grandma. It talks like my grandma. It sounds like my grandma. It's going to be my grandma. But the fact is, they have access to the Akashic records, which means they know your grandma's name. They know what she looks like. They know the nickname she had for you. They know how long she was married. They have access to her entire profile. So what becomes our litmus test for discerning what is true and fake when we are encountering spiritual beings? And I think that there needs to be far more discernment in this area, because a lot of people are getting taken to the cleaners because they think that they're interfacing with someone trustworthy. And you don't know if that is a mask that is being worn. Mm-hmm. And there's a verse in 1 John, I think it's 1 John chapter 4, test every spirit to see whether it is of God. And so I can tell you there's a lot of Christians even that I know, they're not testing every spirit. They're not even testing 50% of them. I had a dream. It had to come from God, and it means this. So I'm going to make this huge life decision based on the dream that I had. And it's like, holy cow, So I really am seeing a lack of discernment that is getting a lot of people in trouble. And the unfortunate thing about this kind of deception is you don't usually know you're in trouble until you're so far deep in the woods that it's really hard to even find the source of what started it. It gets much more complicated. So I would just warn people out there, and the warning is out of love. It's not out of judgment. I'm not telling people start going to church and, bring a hot dish Wednesday night and go on a mission trip. Look, this is purely out of love as a fellow human being. There are things in this cosmic realm that absolutely know how to mask as relatives, as beautiful angels, as spirit guides. Don't take anything at face value, because their technology and their powers are way beyond our technology at this point. And we have the technology to do the same thing. So just use discernment. There are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing, and they're looking for gullible little thralls to do their bidding, right? If they're disembodied or they don't have access to the terrestrial, they need these doors opened. And they might throw a few door prizes at you at first to make you feel like this is really about you and an investment in you. But these are highly, highly evolved beings, and they don't all have our best interests at heart.
So are you talking about, like, if you have a dream about a person that's passed on, that could be the same thing?
Not necessarily just a dream. Like my mother passed away in 2013, and I dream about her all the time. And so not a dream. I'm talking more about these people who wake up in a sleep paralysis state and grandma's at the end of the bed. Right. And especially if the relative is giving you some sort of leadership advice or counsel, or they're giving you arcane information about what's on the other side, be very leery of that kind of thing. Because if something becomes your foundation, like if you decide like, oh, I know the meaning of life, and that becomes the foundation upon everything that you build all of your decisions upon, and that foundation is wrong, you're in hot water now. And so I just warn people that when they get these special messages from the other side, to be very careful. And this is where it gets really difficult. A lot of times we're getting those messages from people who we love dearly, who we miss because they're gone, and our emotions get involved. And it's really hard when we have a spiritually life-changing encounter to have the carpet ripped out from underneath us and to say, like, that person, it really wasn't that person. You don't want to lose that emotional high. And so a lot of times where they trick us and where they get us to believe things falsely is they give us an experience that we're not willing to let go of. And it kind of becomes this monkey paw situation where, you know, you stick the treat in the jar and the monkey sticks his hand in, and then he's forever stuck in that jar because he doesn't know that all he has to do is let go of that treat to get out. A lot of times we get stuck in those same prisons. We get trapped, and the only thing we have to do to get out is to let go of that treat, that reward. And it's hard. Like I said, I lost my mother, and you know what I would pay to have 5 seconds with her to just show up right now. And if it happened, it would be really hard for me to let go of that. But I'm always leery when the foundation of something that we're clinging to is all emotion. We have to be very, very careful because our emotions can lead us astray. You know, I mean, look at all the people that we end up dating and marrying, right? Because we get our emotions and we cannot see clearly. You know, love is blind. It's the same thing with this. When we start interfacing with loved ones, we become blinded. There's a part of our brain that is not going to receive anything contrary because we don't want that event or that experience taken from us. So just be careful.
Where can people find you, Vicki?
You're kind of fading in and out on that audio there.
Yeah.
It's because my dogs are barking. Where can people find you if they have questions for you?
Absolutely. You can find me at VickiJoyAnderson.com, and there is a contact tab on there where you can email me. You can get a hold of me on Instagram at Vicki Joy Author. Feel free to DM me there as well. I love interacting with people. I love hearing their stories. I love learning from what other people have gone through. And the book, They Only Come Out at Night, Exposing the Dark Weapon of Sleep Paralysis, you can get on lamarzulli.net.
I'm definitely going to have to get that book.
There, I'll point it in so you can see how to spell his name.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. I must admit, for a fair few years now, it's like I would never put welcome mats or welcome signs anywhere in my house, like anywhere near my front door or nothing. And my daughter thinks I'm really weird about it. She's like, it's just a mat, just put it there. Nobody's going to come in. And I'm like, no, I don't. It's inviting other things in. It's like you say, it's given permission.
Yeah.
So I will never have nothing like that at my front door.
Somebody just told me that like a year or two ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have never thought of that. And I did have a mat that I think it just said hello. I don't even think it said welcome. But yeah, I did. I got rid of it because I thought, well, that's the first thing you do on a Ouija board is you say hello. So it's kind of like an invite. But yeah, that's amazing. And I'd never thought about that before. But when someone mentioned it, I'm like, oh, get it out.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been an interesting show anyway. Like I say, I've got 1,000,001 questions to ask, but we're past the mark now, so...
Well, I warned you at the beginning, if it's not weird, I don't like it. It gets pretty weird, but...
Yeah, well, the stuff I've got to tell you, it's pretty weird anyway, so you like it.
Okay. Well, hey, you know how to get in touch with me, so you can call me.
Brilliant, will do. Michael, do you want to close up?
Actually, I'll close it out because he's been kind of...
No, we'll let Kell do it.
Kell's got it.
We're passing it around now.
The hot potato.
Yeah, well, we'll let Matt off this tonight because obviously he's not feeling too well. Bless his little cotton socks. What was it that you said the last time, Michael? Bless you, or bless your heart, or something.
Oh, yeah. So we had a team out of Arizona on, Vicki, and we were explaining the term "bless your heart"
Oh.
and how in the South it has a different meaning than the rest of the country.
Yes.
Yeah, and I thought he was being nice when he said it, but obviously not.
It's ironic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you gotta remember, Kel, I'm half Northern and Southern by transplant, so I'm still of the part that actually does mean "bless your heart," not the Southern way.
Oh, I'll let you off then. We just had Enoch jump on there. Enoch, I think it is. I can never pronounce them words. My brain's not with it. Like I say, since that experience I had last night, it's just I just can't think straight at all today. So, hi and bye. By the way.
Yeah, thanks for coming in at the very end.
Yeah, at the very end. Bless your heart. But anyway, like I say, thank you for coming on the show, and it's been an amazing one. And yeah, I've definitely you've given us more questions rather than answers, so I'm gonna have to go in touch with you about that one. But it's been really, really interesting, and yeah, I can see this becoming something. But yeah, great show, and I want to just thank you from all us. And Michael's going to close up the show now.
And thank you, Vicki, and we do hope that you'll come back sometime and we can do another episode about this.
Anytime.
Yeah, that would be great.
Anytime.
Definitely.
All right, well, thank you all for watching. Thank you to the chat room, and thank you for everyone supporting us. And we could not do this show without you all, so I'm having apparently a sentimental moment of saying thank you so much, everyone, for all you do for us. And with that, I'm going to say, make it a blessed day, blessed evening, wherever you are in the world. Good night.
Bye.